Wow, big news about quarterbacks, and it seems to not end in the NFL. Lamar Jackson with the franchise tag. Who else was franchise tag amongst NFL players? Aaron Rodgers meets with the New York Jets. Daniel Jones, Geno Smith cashing in. All of it on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson with you at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. There is so much to get to today. Are the Seahawks and the New York Giants crazy for how much money they doled out to guys who've had one good year starting in the NFL? And Lamar Jackson gets tagged, other franchise tags. What's going on with Aaron Rodgers? Is he potentially a New York Jet? So we've got to start, though, with Lamar Jackson and what's happening here. And there's like talk of collusion. There is, what does it mean with the non-exclusive tag instead of the exclusive franchise tag for Lamar Jackson? So let's start there. Focus in Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens. And I've said all along, and I continue to feel this way, Matt, about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, that if they went non-exclusive franchise tag, which for those who don't know, non-exclusive is the lower franchise tag number. It's about $32 million is what they would pay him on a one-year deal. I don't expect him to play under the franchise tag this year, although it is certainly possible. I thought that if they gave him the non-exclusive franchise tag, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that was more likely Lamar Jackson's coming back to the Baltimore Ravens because they were going to be willing to match any offer. Because if a team signs Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet and the Baltimore Ravens don't match, they get 2 first-round picks back. But I think Baltimore would want more than 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson. So to me, that tells me that they're kind of calling each other's bluff here where it's like, okay, Lamar, go find that deal. He's going to find a deal somewhere. And they'll say, that was more guarantees than we thought, but we're still going to match it.
I tend to agree. So there's a game of chicken here being played a little bit, is often the case in negotiations. And this is such an odd one. I mean, we talked about it earlier that I think if Deshaun Watson's deal never happened, that Lamar's probably got a long-term deal, and I see both sides of the equation, why you would come to the table and say, hey, the starting point is the Watson deal, or Ravens saying, well, that deal's crazy. I'm not going to pretend that deal doesn't matter or doesn't exist. So I think, as you mentioned, the compensation is very, very important in that if I'm the Ravens, I'm not comfortable getting 2 seconds or 2 firsts for Lamar. It's just not enough. I mean, it's better than nothing, of course, but I am comfortable with someone else negotiating a deal for me, and I just say match, and because we couldn't get it done, you can get it done with somebody else, I'll just match, and we'll go from there. And I guess you could sign and trade from that point too.
Yes, and the other part of it is that the confidence that the Ravens have that, and this is where the collusion part comes in, the confidence the Ravens have that he's not going to get an insane amount of guarantees, right? Because like to me, the 2 outcomes are he gets $300 million guaranteed from some really desperate team that needs a quarterback, or he's a Raven. Those are the 2 outcomes for me. But is that team out there that's not the Cleveland Browns to do that this offseason? And it sounds like the Ravens are pretty confident that team's not out there. And immediately following the franchise tag, there were reports that every quarterback needy team that you thought might be interested says, nope, we're not interested. And they all did it right away. The Falcons, the Dolphins, the Panthers, the Commanders, they're all like, nope, we're not pursuing any deal for Lamar Jackson immediately. And so everyone says, that doesn't smell right. That sounds like a little collusion-y to me. And I don't blame people for thinking that way. But maybe that's just knowing the room and knowing that there was one desperate franchise that was willing to do something with a contract that nobody else is willing to do.
Yeah, I like the collusion act. Well, I didn't like it, but I mean, I thought that was a good way of looking at it, is maybe we're all just going to join together as owners, and they've done it in the past, obviously. I mean, that we're just not biting on this. We're not going for fully guaranteed contracts. We don't approve of it. There was one rogue owner, the Browns, that did something the other 31 do not approve of. But I also thought, since it's kind of sunk in and I've digested it a little bit, I wonder if it's so easy as if I'm the Falcons front office or any of those teams you mentioned or the Colts or whoever that wasn't brought up, is it that transparent that Baltimore, we don't want to do your bidding for you. You're just going to match it anyways. Why would we waste our time?
I think there's a big part of that too.
Yeah.
Teams just know what they're doing. They're like, no, because that's why the exclusive tag to me was more likely for Lamar to get traded, because then nobody can sign him to an offer sheet, but the Ravens can still allow him to go seek his own trade. And then that would have been the Ravens saying, look, you can come play on this 1 year, $40 million contract, but we don't really want that either. Basically, we're willing to let you go look for trades. And then they got to come talk to us about the compensation. We're asking for 3 first-round picks instead of 2 first-round picks, especially if they're late first-round picks. And then, then the Ravens are still in control of the trade market, because here I can't really see much of a, unless a team goes crazy. And that's, the Ravens would not put themselves in a position to lose Lamar for 2 first-round picks.
I don't think so either.
And the only team, and the Raiders were reported to be one of those teams as well, that was not pursuing a deal for Lamar Jackson. But then there was a report that said that the Raiders were not ruling out anything as it pertains to quarterbacks. But there's another angle to this with guaranteed contracts, is the Raiders are the least likely team to pull something like this off, because one of the things that has to happen with guaranteed contracts is you have to put all of that money into escrow immediately. So not only do you have to pay, a $50 million signing bonus, you have to put the other $200 million immediately in escrow. The Raiders are the last team in the league that has $250 million sitting around in liquid cash,
lock it up,
in the account for a player. So that's another hard thing, and that's another difficulty why teams don't want to operate with so many huge hundreds of millions of dollars in guarantees for players, because they have to come up with the money in liquid cash immediately to put in an escrow account for those guaranteed contracts.
It's not just monopoly money and all of us just talking, an owner has to say, well, I got $250 million laying around, I'm sure the rate, I hadn't thought of that angle. That's great. I'm sure a lot of the family owned businesses, like with all respect to the Rooneys here, do they have $250 million laying around? You know what I mean? Like not everyone is Walmart or whatever.
Yeah. Is that like you or I like, I don't want to spend a couple thousand, but I've got some money in the bank and I could throw down a couple $1,000. Is that what it's like for $200 million for some of these owners? I think for some more so than others, like when you're a Walmart heir or like Jeff Bezos, and that's sort of where the money's getting crazy in the NFL. That's what we're talking about in the modern day NFL is, if you're trying to buy an NFL franchise, you got to be one of the 5 richest people on the planet, basically, to pull that off. And people are talking about Jeff Bezos maybe buying the Washington Commanders, and that's what kind of money we're talking about now in the NFL. It's getting wild. But some of these old school owners and just family owned teams that have owned the teams forever, like the Davises in Las Vegas, their business is the Raiders. They aren't
right.
They've got other things going on, but. Yeah,
they're doing just fine, but they don't have $250 million just to lay around.
Yeah, and it always feels like monopoly money. We always talk about it on the podcast, and it just it doesn't make much sense. But $250 million, even for really rich people, is a lot of money to have in liquid cash ready to go to just throw in an account and sit there for a couple of years.
You used a slight example there, and to me, it'd be like me or you walking in a Subaru or Volkswagen dealership and just saying, I'm going to buy that, and here's a check, as opposed to, well, I wouldn't mind paying for it over a couple of years. You know what I mean? Like everybody else in the world.
Finance this thing a little bit.
Yeah. Right. The salary cap's going up, I'm going to have a little more money,
and maybe the hundreds of dollars I'm paying every month feels a little better in 4 years than it does right now, too.
Exactly. Yeah. As opposed to I'm just going to buy this thing in cash in my pocket,
So next, I want to talk about potential landing spots for Lamar Jackson, if there is something that happens here. And there are still some opportunities for maneuverability. It's the most maneuverable franchise tag with this. What teams might make sense for Lamar Jackson? The other franchise tags, we got to talk Aaron Rodgers, potentially with the Jets now, and Daniel Jones, Geno Smith contracts next. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. NFL season is over, but the NBA season is coming to a head, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. I love how easy it is to build your parlays and do everything and maneuver the app or the website. You can bet on everything: money line, point scorers, 3-pointers drained. Of course, the NCAA tournament is coming. It was always one of the most fun things to bet on. I love the draft props, so you can still bet on the NFL, Super Bowl futures, future MVPs, and a ton of draft props growing in number at FanDuel. And of course, those same game parlays if you want a chance for a bigger payout. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if you don't win your first bet. Go to fanduel.com/lockedon. That's fanduel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who is the team if he's not a Baltimore Raven? Matt, I tell you right now, you got to look into your crystal ball. I tell you, Lamar Jackson is not on the Baltimore Ravens next year. What team is he on?
I'm going with Washington, but I'm going to steal that from Matthew Berry. You know, Matthew and I were at ESPN together. I saw him at the Combine, and for the site was formerly Roto World, NBC Sports, or whatever it is now, he wrote a column yesterday, the 30-some things I learned at the Combine. And he led it off with Washington, and he's a admitted Commanders fan for life, Matthew is. And basically the first bullet point he wrote about was, who's going to be the owner of the Commanders? You know, is he really selling? Is he really not? But the second bullet point was, don't be surprised if Daniel Snyder kind of gives the league the finger and just says, we'll give you a guaranteed contract on my way out. Might help his legacy with the Commander fans. You know, like finally got a guy and boom, I'm out. You know, mic drop.
Right. And that's a better, it's like acquiring smaller tech companies to make your portfolio look better for you to sell the bigger umbrella company.
That too. Right.
The Commanders with a superstar quarterback in Lamar Jackson and all this news publicity makes it more valuable for him to check out, and he doesn't have to pay those guarantees in 5 years for whatever that new owner is. So that's actually an interesting angle I haven't thought of. It makes it a lot more possible. And of course, Lamar needs to want to go to whatever organization that is. I think there is still an opportunity for some maneuverability with trade. So there's some teams that you can't sign an offer sheet right away because you don't have a first round pick this year or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like the Miami Dolphins or, I covered the 49ers. So we talked a lot about this with the 49ers. It's very unlikely, but possible because you can still negotiate a trade with the Ravens. You can say, hey, we're going to sign him to an offer sheet. Are you willing to move on from him? We're going to sign him to this deal. Here's the deal. We can't sign the offer sheet, but let's figure out what the compensation would be. Then you trade and sign. And so that can still be changed. And the Ravens can also do a thing where a team will call him up and like, look, Baltimore, you're just going to match whatever we sign him to, right? And they're like, well, look, you throw another first-round pick, then we'll get our 3 first-round picks back, and then we won't match this offer. So there is some maneuverability with this, and it could still turn out that he gets traded. I think it's overwhelmingly more likely that they match any offer, and they're pretty sure that there's no other teams out there besides the Cleveland Browns that are willing to actually do as much guaranteed. But all it takes is one, Matt, and we've seen what it looks like with desperation. It's funny because when you have that quarterback, you're like, oh, man, I don't want to go this far. But when you don't have that quarterback for so long, there might be some franchises that are like, you know what? It's worth it to us because we haven't been able to get this quarterback for 30 stinking years. Let's go do it. And he's 25, 26 years old. He's going to see the end of the contract anyway. So maybe the guarantee doesn't matter all that much.
So I almost said the Panthers just because I think they're super impulsive, kind of a new owner. I'll go get what I want. I'm unbelievably wealthy, and that would be the franchise face. But thinking more about Washington, why wouldn't you, if you're Washington, say, hey, Lamar, here's the contract we're going to offer you. It's Deshaun Watson's, verbatim. Boom. He probably says,
plus $1.
Plus $1, yeah. Right. The Price is Right move with $1, and okay, or plus 1% or whatever. Okay, you're the highest paid and it's fully guaranteed. He probably goes, I'll sign that. Baltimore might say, we already had this talk, Lamar. I can't match that. Otherwise, we would have had a deal done by now. And where would that leave the Ravens? You'd get the 16th pick, which is pretty stinky, compared to it's not a top 10 pick.
Worst scenario possible is a team in the second half of the first round signs Lamar to an offer sheet that is so out of whack from what the Ravens want to do that they can't match it.
Yeah, so they end up with 16.
Scenario for the Ravens. 2 first-rounders that are late first round.
Yeah, that's what I mean. 16 and probably a playoff team pick next year. So you get 16 this year and 24 next year for Lamar. And then now I got to go find a quarterback. And Washington, and he sells the team, and everyone's like, "Boy, I hated that owner, but gosh, Lamar."
Yeah, the Daniel Snyder giving a finger to the league with the contract that nobody else in the league wants to, because
Right.
there's been some owners that are against Daniel Snyder too, and
Oh,
so
they all
I
dislike him, right? So
wow,
then, what's Burrow and Herbert and Hurts ask for?
that's
Well, now
really
2 teams have them.
oh,
I want a
and
full
then
team.
now
Right.
every contract is guaranteed. Now,
Absolutely.
now
Right.
Nick Bosa is saying, "Well, I'm the best defensive player in the league. I'm going to get the
Right.
biggest
Right.
non-quarterback contract. I want guarantees too."
Justin
And
Jefferson's coming up, and yeah, right.
it's the new age NFL, all because one team dipped their
And
toe
Dan
in that.
and Daniel Snyder chuckles and gets, a bunch of billion for
And
his
gets
Washington team,
multiple
and
billions of dollars and hangs out in tropical islands for the rest of his life.
right, like you wouldn't anyways. But I mean, I'm
Well, yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Right. But I don't think that's the craziest fiction book we ever wrote.
Oh, it's going to be fun. It is going to be fun. The other franchise tags that were thrown out, there was a last-minute contract for Daniel Jones we'll get to in a second. So that gave the New York Giants the opportunity to use the franchise tag on running back Saquon Barkley. The running back number for franchise tags is $10.091 million. Both New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley and Las Vegas Raiders running back Josh Jacobs get the franchise tag along with Tony Pollard. So 3 running backs getting the franchise tag from New York, Las Vegas, and Dallas, respectively. We already knew about the Evan Ingram franchise tag, $11.3 million for him. Lamar Jackson, of course, $32.4 million on the franchise tag. And then defensive tackle Daron Payne. Didn't really see this one coming. It wasn't widely reported that Washington has slapped the defensive tackle franchise tag number on Daron Payne, which is just under $19 million. Do you have any big thoughts on any of the other franchise tags, Matt?
Well, the running backs are no-brainers to me, and as usual, running backs get screwed in the market because it's so easy to say 10 million for a position that doesn't last long. I'm going to run this right into the ground and then let you go. I mean, so maybe you never get the big payday if you're Pollard or Jacobs or Barkley or whatever, and so be it. That's just don't let your kids grow up to be running backs.
The only one that it's a good deal for is Pollard because he's coming off the injury anyway. So he probably wouldn't get that big long-term deal. If he can come back healthy, then maybe he's in a better position next year. And then it would be less likely. It's still possible for the Cowboys to slap the second franchise tag, but the number goes up. And so probably an okay deal for Pollard, but I'm sure Jacobs and Barkley would have much, much rather been on the free agent market.
No question about it. Tight end similar in that it's really, really cheap. Is Engram one of the best 5 tight ends on the planet? No, but they gave him 10 million this year. This year it's 11. So it's like, well, you were easily $1 million more better than you were a year ago in terms of your value on the open market. So he got screwed a little bit too, but good deal for the Jags. My only thing is we just had this long spiel about Washington signing Lamar. Does franchising Payne get in the way of that? I mean, that D-line's crazy expensive. I don't know their finances well enough,
Yeah, to me, it's just like, well, we aren't going to be able to sign you to that long-term deal, but we want you around one more time, and then we're probably going to have to let you walk next offseason.
Yeah, and he'll help him win the East with Lamar.
Right, or maybe that's just them saying, look, we want you back, and we're going to try to figure something else out, and we're not going to let you hit the free agent market. Maybe we'll sign you and let one of the other guys walk later.
I like the player a lot. I think Payne's an ascending, very talented, top 10 defensive tackle, not a top 5 guy.
Well, you know who doesn't like it is the Chicago Bears, because I think that's the first phone call they ever made in free agency is Daron Payne, especially if their plan is to maybe draft an edge guy in the first round instead of Jalen Carter.
Carter makes sense. I mean, Hargrave's out there, but he's a little older, so yeah, you're probably right.
Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, heating up. There's a meeting. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, maybe Woody Johnson, I'm not sure exactly who it was, but flying to meet with Aaron Rodgers, and the Packers gave Aaron Rodgers and the Jets permission to have a little chat. Is this the perfect marriage for Rodgers to finish his career as a New York Jet, man?
I tend to think so. I mean, he's such an oddball. Who knows? He's going to do everything at his pace or go back into a dark hole or whatever he's going to do, or, find some hallucinogens to figure it out. But I'm sure nothing will happen quick. Man, I'm not going to say that. I mean, when we end this recording, it might be Aaron Rodgers a Jet. I just think it's very logical. And one angle I think is important to the Jets, I heard Mike Lombardi talking about this, I think it was, maybe misspoke who said it, but they have not totally given up on Wilson. But this is a perfect move for Wilson. He's still cheap. He's looked up to Aaron Rodgers his whole life. Hey, Aaron, we want you for a year or 2 And please take this young pup under your wing and at least let him follow you around like a puppy a little bit. And maybe we win the Super Bowl with you, and then you hand it off to him, and we're in good shape. You know what I mean? It's a small aspect of it. If Wilson fell off the planet, they still probably make the trade. But, it's just another aspect of it.
I've loved Rodgers to the Jets. I think it makes the most sense. I like it for both Rodgers and I like it for the Jets. I think the Jets instantly are probably right there with the Buffalo Bills as favorites in the AFC behind the Kansas City Chiefs. And with Rodgers, can he commit enough that it would make sense for the Jets to make the move? Because it's so costly dollars wise, so costly in trade, because they're gonna, the Packers are gonna ask for a ton back in draft picks. So
let me stop you there, because I hadn't thought of this angle, but Mike Lombardi was saying this too, is Rodgers can determine where he goes. So in kind of a Daniel Snyder-like manner, he could give the Packers the finger and say, hey, Green Bay, these are your only options. Trade me to the Jets, or I'm going to retire and go host Jeopardy. And with there's only one team competing, it might be a second-round pick. You know what I mean?
Right. Or so he tells the Jets, like, look, I'll play for you, and I'm going to tell him that. So use that as a bargaining chip so you don't have to give up as much.
Right.
And he tells the Packers, I'm not sure yet. You can trade me to the Jets. I'm cool with that. But as for retirement, maybe you just have to cut me. I don't know. I'm going to let you hang in the wind, so you better take whatever the Jets offer.
And Green Bay, I will tell you, I'm not playing for you. I'm either playing for the Jets, I'm retiring, or you can cut me.
Or you can cut me, yeah.
And you're not going to maximize what you get back in, trade that way.
So if you are the Jets, you're definitely thinking, I don't want to spend 2 first-round picks and then go through this again next year with Aaron Rodgers.
Sure.
You got to say, hey, I will play for 2 more years for sure. Then we'll have another conversation before year 3 of this.
Or even have some insurances in terms of the compensation.
Right. Yeah.
We'll give you based on how many games he plays in a Jets uniform, or does he return next year? A conditional second if he comes back in 2024 or whatever.
Right. The first round pick isn't until 2026 or 2025, because you got to make sure he comes back in 2024 again to earn the first round pick instead of a third round pick in 2025 or whatever.
Yeah. And then at least both parties can get out of it a little unscathed,
Are the Seattle Seahawks and the New York Giants out of their ever-loving minds, Matt, with the money they threw at Geno Smith and Daniel Jones, respectively, next? Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. Make sure you subscribe to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel. Tell a friend, hit the thumbs up, hit the bell, all of those things. We're coming at you every day throughout the offseason, which is going to be so much fun in 2023. Check out the Locked On NFL Draft. And remember, your team is covered as well right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to start with Daniel Jones. We teased it a little bit earlier, and it allowed the Giants to franchise tag Saquon Barkley. Did the one better year for Daniel Jones, did it make the Giants do something silly, or were the Giants smart to lock up a quarterback at $40 million that potentially could come back and have an even better year next year and make $45 million?
The deadline made the deal happen so they could keep both players, Barkley and Jones. And I feel different about Geno and Jones, to be honest with you. Maybe it's because of their age, maybe because Seattle has 2 first-round picks and could still draft a guy. Jones is the Giants quarterback now. Giants fans go buy Jones jerseys. They're safe. He's going to be your guy for a while through thick and thin, sickness and poor. I mean, he's your guy. I don't feel good about it, though. I know you don't. I mean, you've said this leading up. Yeah, I mean,
here's my question. So I know the deadline of the franchise tag kind of made the deal happen. My question is, why does it matter? You still franchise tag Saquon Barkley. What other team is giving Daniel Jones $40 million? And if they do, good. They probably save you from yourself, because I love Brian Dable and Kafka and the job they did there. Right. I would love to see them with a better quarterback and see what that could look like. So they've locked themselves into what I would call that purgatory of expensive, middle-of-the-road quarterback. And look, maybe Daniel Jones, there's evidence that he's below middle of the road. Basically, it's the Kirk Cousins conundrum that the Minnesota Vikings are in right now. Like, well, we have an okay quarterback, but half the teams half the teams we play still have a better quarterback, and we're paying him so much money we can't improve the rest of our team because we're paying this quarterback so much. And I believe in Daboll's ability to develop a quarterback, and I would have swung for the fences on a quarterback and not locked myself into Daniel Jones. And I don't think he would have gotten more money somewhere else. I think you could have done this deal if you're willing to do it a month or a week, 2 weeks from now, whatever. Once he talked to other teams, he wasn't getting more than this.
Are you a much better team than if you signed Jacoby Brissett to a 2-year, $28 million deal while you search for a long-term answer?
Are we positive Daniel Jones is better than Jacoby Brissett?
I'm not positive of that. Absolutely not. And to your point, and I think this is also sort of the case with Seattle, who are you competing against? You're competing against yourself for this player. And if he did go hit the open market and he got 40, all right, we get a comp pick back and I didn't make the mistake. I mean, like, I don't know what the rush was.
And you gave him the money that he would have found on the open market anyway, but without the competition.
Yeah. I mean,
you got the open market dollars,
so
you're not bidding against anybody.
Right.
And probably he goes out there and finds out, well, yeah, you're right. We didn't get $40 million from anybody. Is that
right?
I think both Daniel Jones and Geno Smith, why I don't really like either deal necessarily because of their track record, and you're paying them coming off their best season.
Right. You're buying high.
You're buying high for sure. And you're also locking yourself into a middle of the road quarterback, and less so Seattle, I think, than
right.
New York Giants.
Like from Seattle, I'm drafting Richardson if he's there, no doubt in my mind.
Right. Yeah. So because it works out perfectly, and you still get a couple more years out of Geno, and then figure it out. And obviously Geno's contract is lower dollar wise than Daniel Jones, and so the Giants are a little locked in a little bit more. But here's the other thing: is maybe the Giants saw the improvement, and I think ownership's part of it as well with the Giants. They believe in Daniel Jones, they like the person. And maybe there's more there. Who knows? Maybe it's like Josh Allen, where it's like, oh, we saw a little peak. Oh, and then there was something else there. Like maybe he's an MVP candidate quarterback next year with the Giants. I don't know. Maybe, and with like better weapons around and better receivers. But from what I saw, they won games because of the ground game, because of a huge jump in improvement in the red zone. Quarterback play on third downs between the 20s. He was below average NFL starting quarterback.
I agree. And so I don't know if the Giants as an organization, even pre-Daboll, deserve many benefits of the doubts with these type decisions. They haven't been it's the same ownership. They haven't been great at them lately. But if we at least give them the benefit of the doubt, their argument could be this guy was the 4th or 5th pick in the draft, which none of us thought he should be, but he was,
Right. Yeah.
So there was
it's like feeding into itself a little bit.
Right. So maybe the whole league thought he was a 4th or 5th pick in the draft. We just kind of went, it's not real exciting. He's from Duke. He's kind of boring, and he had the worst receivers in the league, and Daboll's in love with them and saw a huge step forward and looks at him and says, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Josh Allen, here we come. Maybe, I mean, it's possible. I'm not going to just dig a grave and throw him in there and say it's a terrible move. You have no chance, but I'm with you. It wasn't for me.
Well, there's clearly something that the Giants with multiple front offices now have loved about Daniel Jones. So it's something to be said for that. And
there is.
And we'll see what it ends up looking like for Daniel Jones. And who knows, maybe in 2 years, it looks like a bargain of a contract.
It might. That's one thing. The Geno and Jones deals indicate to me that the cap is going to go up. And whatever we think Burrow and Herbert are going to make, add 25% to it.
I think a perfect example is like, oh my gosh, what was it? $500 million contract long-term that the Kansas City Chiefs signed Patrick Mahomes to. It seems like an eternity ago now. And Patrick Mahomes might be the best deal in the league.
Bargain, right? Yeah. Right. Imagine what his deal is going to be next or whatever. Allen looks cheap. All these guys look cheap. So the league is flourishing. Let's just put it that way.
You know what it does, though, is it raises the price so much where I think the value is drafting and developing quarterbacks so much, and it already was, but even backup quarterbacks, because now backup quarterbacks are like $10 million, and you hope the guy never takes a snap. That's a starting a player is what a backup quarterback costs now. And so and you know who loves this the most is guys like Jimmy Garoppolo. They're like, oh, awesome. Hopefully Aaron Rodgers retires, and I got the Raiders and the Jets in a bidding war for me, and I get to throw out $37.5, $40 million.
Yeah,
Whereas I thought
right.
Jimmy Garoppolo was going to sign for $20 million max this offseason.
It's a great point because the backup thing's interesting too. So looking back, should Desmond Ridder have been a second-round pick, not a third, or even a first-round pick, just because he's a quality, cheap backup? You know, like if you just look at it financially. So I always bring it back to the Steelers, but there's a million guys just like Mason Rudolph. But Mason Rudolph's hitting the free agent market. If I'm him, he probably got $1 million more now than he would have a year ago, or $2 million more. You know what I mean? Just because he's not terrible, and all these backups play more than the NFL wants. So why shouldn't backups ask for more?
And even if you are playing the comp pick game, some of these backup quarterbacks, they make so much money that you're getting a pretty high comp pick back for a guy who's signing as a number 2, number 3 quarterback. Not that that's why you would draft and develop a guy, but it's just like, let's keep cheap quarterbacks in house that are good, and we'll benefit in some way because we'll either develop a good quarterback, we'll develop a quarterback in trade for somebody else, we'll get a comp pick back for this player, even if he's not great, he'll sign multi-million-dollar backup deal to where we're going to get something back for it in return somehow, where you might not get that at other positions.
Yeah, that's a great angle. I mean, that might be the next step of this too. Like in the scouting community, when I was scouting, I mean, there's kind of a theory out there, like the Packers subscribed to this when they had Favre. Draft a quarterback every year. And I mean, they ended up with Brunell and Hasselbeck and, you know, like guys that were good that just weren't Brett Favre. Well, why not do that now? You know, like the guy with a 5th round grade, why don't I take him in the 3rd round, showcase him all preseason? 4 years from now, he leaves and I get a 3rd rounder for him and I had a good backup in the process. Or I trade him, you know, first Kyler Murray gets hurt, Arizona comes calling. Sure, you can have him for a second. You know, they're assets, they're commodities.
The game of dollars in the NFL is wild. And I think this offseason with the cap going up post-COVID, we're going to see a lot of wild stuff. And there's going to be a lot of movement. Big names, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. We've seen a couple of quarterbacks now get locked up by their teams. Of course, there's 4 first-round quarterbacks, the jockeying for position at the top of the NFL draft. Anything can happen, Matt, every single day in the NFL, and that's why we're here with you every single day. So we appreciate all of you making us your first listen. Make sure you're subscribed up, especially on the brand new Peacock and Williamson standalone YouTube channel. We're no longer on the Locked On NFL channel, so make sure you're subscribed up there, even if you don't watch us on YouTube all that often. But yeah, come say hi, drop a comment on YouTube as well if you're newly subscribed. And we had to push our mailbag episode a day later because of all the quarterback news here. So Thursday instead, we're going to come back and do our weekly mailbag. Hit us with your questions at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, and we'll be back with you next time right here, Peacock and Williamson.